So I want to kind of get things going, and maybe we can get out of here and have a break and then reconvene at dinner and talk about some really important issues like this. But what's brought everybody here is what we're going to talk about next, and that's Landing Zone Peanuts, Landing Zone Snoopy Peanuts, primarily May 5th, 1968. So what I was thinking of doing is we'll just have these two gentlemen start off talking about their experience. When they get done, if anybody else wants to come and talk about it, they're welcome to do so. Absolutely no obligation whatsoever. We got a video camera, we'll video it. But you know, your experience matters. That's one thing that I've noticed researching this, is the battle was so fluid from 10 feet. 20 feet. I mean, everybody's perspective was different of the battle, and it's all really important to tell. There's some pictures of the hill behind it, these guys. This is one that McPhee took. It's actually two pictures, and I realized that you could line them up. So this, Charlie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this would be where the mortar platoon was, 4th platoon. There's a little swale saddle in there where the helicopters would have landed. There's the top, where you were. And then I think Kish and those folks were over there. The FDC was about right here. And then we over the hill. I've got a better picture of it. And then the artillery here, artillery guys, and then the perimeter would have been Alpha, and at various times Bravo Company and Delta Company sometimes. Now, the April 5th, the perimeter was being supplied by Alpha Company and the 4th platoon of Bravo Company as well. They were on the hill. And there were some sundry units. The 25th DOD had a couple of folks. There were some engineers on the hill. But it was primarily 1st to 7th, and headquarters 1st to the 5th, and Alpha Company 1st to the 5th as well. So I'll show some of these pictures. If folks want to say this is where I was on the hill, that would be how we do it. So with that, that's enough of what I'm going to talk about, because this is your story and I want you to tell it. I'll go ahead. Who wants to start with this one? I'll do it, Charlie. Like I said, I met Charlie
7+ years ago.
7+ years ago. And it's an amazing story. I mean, it really is. Another one of Mike's guys that I found several years ago, his name was Fred Woodruff. I don't know if any of you guys remember him. His name has changed since then, and how I tracked him down, I can't remember. But I tracked him down, and he was a bit surprised that I tracked him down. He sent me his memoirs of his experience at LZ Peanuts. And as I was reading through it, I said, I'll be damned. That's Charlie Brown that he's talking about in this story. And I know you probably don't want me to read it, but I'm going to read it anyway. So this is from Fred Woodruff. He's one of Mike's guys. He was near the FDC when everything was hitting the fan. An infantry officer had jumped on top of the FDC bunker and was now screaming commands and waving directions overhead to anyone that would listen. Was he crying for attention or the possibility of a war promotion? I wondered as my rear end puckered, and I crouched lower still behind the blast wall. At least this infantry professional did not run away. He was into it. The infantry officer, still standing on the bunker above me, he wrote some other stuff, but the infantry officer still standing on the bunker above me took a hit to his shoulder and dropped to one knee. Grabbing the wound with his free hand, he steadied himself, but almost as if nothing had happened, quickly stood back up and continued shouting directions, commanding men from his vantage point to different locations to protect and tighten our shrinking perimeter. I don't know who this man was, but he was most certainly a hero. That was from Fred Woodruff, and he's describing this man right here. And Charlie, I'm going to let you talk about your experiences on LZ Peanuts.
Wow. I didn't know Fred before this happened, to let you know, and I didn't know this, well, anyway. I had about a month to 6 weeks left in my tour, and I was up in my bunker, nice and deep, dug by a backhoe. I was working the TOC, the Tactical Operations Center for the 1-5 Cav. I'm 21 years old now, first lieutenant. I turned 21 in Vietnam. And, you know, we'd taken a lot of fire, we'd taken a lot of rounds on the hill, and every once in a while we get sniped at and what have you. But that night, I heard more than the usual amount of incoming, small arms fire. And came out of the bunker and stuck my head in the TOC, and they said, we're under attack. And I told the colonel I'd head down the hill to see what was going on, because I think by then you guys had started some illumination coming in from LZ Snapper. And I'm looking down the hill and I'm seeing North Vietnamese soldiers come up in a manner I had never seen in my 11 months in Vietnam. Because this was like a movie. These guys were coming up this hill. There were masses of them. We're used to them being in the tree line, sniping at us and hitting us from left and right, but never standing in the open, walking up the hill in formation. So I came down, and I didn't have a clue where the FDC was or anything else, but I knew I stood on a bunker, and I was screaming a lot because at that point they had gotten through our perimeter, and there was few, if any, guys actually firing at these North Vietnamese that are massed right in front of us, standing or working their way up into the battery. So yeah, I did make a lot of noise, and I put a magazine out myself and a borrowed weapon, but there weren't any tracers in it, and I didn't see anybody go down because I was firing at them, which makes it only that difficult to actually hit a moving human at nighttime in this semi-dark. Matter of fact, most of our casualties from that night were concussion and not small arms fire. So they weren't that good with their weapons either. But Mike was throwing a ton of hand grenades down there at the time. They were throwing a ton of satchel charges at us, and they worked their way all the way around the artillery battery. They worked themselves up to the unit in front of the Jeep, up the hill. You can look at a picture and you'll see that had been exploded out, that bunker right there. They worked themselves up to the, I'll call it the eastern side of our perimeter, where there's a picture of a couple of dead NBA sappers. And Scott will vouch for the fact that they worked themselves through the line on his side, which was the western side, just up the hill from the battery itself. Scott has the best story ever, but anyway, we spent a long night doing a lot of things, and one of the guys that you started the night with was named Ted Catron. Ted was a Pathfinder, and he was on the hill to help get the guns out in the morning because we were going east to Dong Ha. Ted was a West Pointer. I'd run into him 2 times before in my 11 months in country. One down in the Bong Song area where he spent a night on the hill with us and we got to know each other. And the next time was at LZ Stud. And there's a photo in my group of both Ted with his black hat. That's what we call them, black hat Pathfinders, the guys that call the aircraft in. And then there's a picture of me visiting him at his home in Rochester, New York, probably 10 years ago. And Ted has service-connected Parkinson's disease, Agent Orange-connected Parkinson's. But a good man. He went back and did a second tour in Vietnam as a fixed-wing pilot. So anyway, Ted and I were there at the time we were calling Blue Max in. And we fundamentally, because the NVA were just sitting on the other side of the Jeep, we called them in on ourselves. We were the front edge of the perimeter at that time. And we had quite a night, to say the least. There was one point in the night when I headed down the hill and started help dig some guys out of the bunker that had been overrun in the by sappers and imploded, I'll call it. And you know, I've said this story to Jeanette. And I won't, well, where is Jeanette? But anyway.
Right.
Oh, there you are, sweetheart. We dug a soldier out of one of these bunkers that was still alive and missing an arm, but clearly mortally wounded. And he kept saying to us, "Tell my wife I love her. Tell my wife I love her." And we asked him, "Where are you from?" Because we just wanted to make conversation, because dead soldiers and dying soldiers was pretty common in our business. And he said he was from Southern California, and I was from Southern California at that time. I was from San Bernardino, but I never remembered his name. Chevroni's a tough one to remember in a night like that. But I never forgot the circumstances and the experience and the words. And during the search for information on this ride, it turns out Scott and I had a brief encounter that night and spent time together digging people out. So I am really glad for the sunrise that morning. I'm glad for everyone that held on, and I'm glad that those of us in this room and a bunch of other ones made it off the hill, because that was for me the most difficult combat I'd been in my entire tour. So that's enough for me right now.
Okay. Thanks, Trevor. Mike, I met again early on in the process. Mike was a lieutenant with the battery, and are you going to talk about Ron Weiss being flown off? Or? Okay. So, again, Mike, just an incredible wealth of knowledge on what was going on from his perspective right around this area of the hill, which is where a lot of the activity was, my understanding. And I've asked him to talk about some of his experiences as well.
First of all, I want to thank John for organizing this thing for years. I want to be able to get the infantry's perspective on this battle. Of course, I know a lot about the artillery's perspective because that day saw me in the space of 45 minutes maybe go from fire direction officer, which is a junior job in the battery, to XO, to battery commander. I picked a very bad day for my first command, but I wasn't aware of that when it happened. I kind of give you an idea of my experiences over there and how much experience I had. My first day in country, I landed in Cam Ranh Bay. And when you go in there, we got in fairly early today and went in, they said, well, you don't have anything, you're excused from duties the rest of the afternoon. Here's where the officers club is. So I went there, had a great time, drank some beer all afternoon, all night, reported back in the next day, and there's a processing sergeant in there, and he says, well, what we're going to do is to keep you here for 3 or 4 days to get you acclimated. And I said, acclimated to what? He says, the heat and humidity. I said, Sarge, I'm from Florida all my life. I am acclimated to heat and humidity. He says, great, Lieutenant. You can go out today. I guarantee you, there's some old retired sergeant sitting in a VFW bar today saying, let me tell you about the dumbest lieutenant I ever met. Because he'd be right. And I don't have any fancy slides or anything. I got some notes here because my memory's not as good as everybody else that's been up here. But I can read as long as I have these. There's an article in John's treatise on this that he's talking about 2 of the 1st and 5th guys and what they're doing, when they're going to have to go out and so forth, so on. And they were asking about somebody, and one of the guys says, yeah, I just saw them down there sitting on a bunker playing the guitar and singing. And I want to assure you, we did not just sit by the campfire singing Kumbaya. When we had a fire mission, everybody had to scramble out and be on that gun in no more than 10 seconds and be ready to fire, because when you get a mission like that, you have to do a lot of things. The Fire Direction Center has to get the data, compute it, put it to the gun, got to go to a battalion first and get clearance, put it to the guns, and wait for the command to fire, which they send down to the XO. Well, the first thing they do is give you deflection, because that's the hardest thing to do, is to move that tube. And we were at 6,400 mils, which is 360 degrees capability. We might be pointing here, and the mission be back this way. And then it might shift over here as we adjust. There's a lot going on, and we have to keep track of the number of rounds out of each tube, because that will affect the accuracy on it. We've got to have the humidity for the day, the temperature, and the lot number off of the ammo to make sure we're not shooting, high test rounds here and medium grade over here, because you have to make compensations for that. So there's a lot to go on that kept us from singing and playing guitar more often. But one thing I want to make clear is how much we think of all the grunts, and I use that as a term of endearment, because there's a lot of us that have been out as grunts when we were FO. Kind of a sticking point with us that we don't get a CBI.
CIB.
CIB.
It's okay.
Wait a
It's
minute.
okay.
Okay, we're good. Because we spend the time out there just like the grunts do. We eat with them, we sleep with them, we die with them, and we feel like that's kind of a deserved thing. But that's another story. Well, I'll continue griping later. But our mission, the mission of artillery, is very simple. That's to support the infantry, period. We don't do anything else. We don't take land. We don't charge. We support the infantry. And we have to get steel on the ground accurately and quickly. That's it. So we have a great deal of admiration for you. And I tell you what, I have never found it not to be reciprocal. I've never met an infantry guy yet that didn't have complimentary things to say about the artillery. It might be nothing but thanks. Do accidents happen? Sure they do. But that's sometimes on the infantry, sometimes on the artillery, sometimes somewhere else. But I'll give you an example. I was down at Bike Week in Daytona one year, and I had on my 77th hat and a shirt, and somebody came up and patted me on the back and stuck a drink out here in my hand and said, "Welcome home, sir." And I was a little bit surprised. I turned and I said, first of all, how did you know that I was sir? He says, "Well, you got Lieutenant Maynard on the back of your hat." That guy was smart enough to be an artilleryman now.
And stay in Cameron Bay for 4 days.
Yeah. But when he did that, he also said, "Who are you with?" And I said, "Well, I was with the 1st and 77th. He said, "What was your call sign?" I said, "We were birth control." He reached around and hugged me and said, "You guys fired for me one time, and if you hadn't, I probably wouldn't be here." And there is no greater personal reward for an officer, anybody for that matter. I think you back this up because I've seen a lot of complimentary things said about this man from this man. If you get a compliment from a NCO, particularly an EM, you've done something right, trust me, because there's that natural antipathy there between the EMs and the officers, because we get viewed as having special privileges, which we do, but they're earned, and that's not to say that every one of the EMs and NCOs aren't just as smart, and smarter in my case a lot of times, but there's that natural antipathy, resentment there. So when you got one of those guys to say, he was a good officer, he did a good job, that's a heck of a thing to take to your grave. Really, really good. Anyway, I'm going to give you some of my war stories from up there now. I want all y'all to pay attention, because some of them might be true. The LZ was just too small to put a battery up there. The kill radius of a 105 is 50 meters. In other words, when you shoot around here, 25 meters on either side should take care of anybody that's there. So what we tried to do was to put our tubes about 50 meters apart, because that way you got a solid curtain of steel when it goes out there and they're all firing. On peanuts, and we also moved them up and back. We call what they call a lazy W, and we, one here, there, like this. So we spaced them between front and back as well. Peanuts, you can look down the picture here, and they're virtually in a straight line. And there's no more than like 20 to 30 meters. I'd say majority of them are probably 30, but there are several of them are only 20 meters apart, because there just wasn't room. There was one place on the end that I wanted to utilize and move them on out there, but that was where we normally brought in our ammo and put it down there. Chinooks would come in and drop a pallet load, I'd say pallets and net load really, of ammo, and they were in boxes, about yay big wooden boxes that had the rounds packed in them. So I couldn't do that. We just kept them there and did, best we could with what we had. If you'll also notice this picture up here, you look up where the talk area is, and they've got about a half dozen antennas sticking up out of it, plus it's sitting up on a hill. Now, the problem that comes, what we call a sight to mask problem. In other words, you got something up here, we need to fire out there towards the back of the room. We've got to jack that thing up here so we don't knock down antennas or tents, for instance. So it was a difficult place to fire from, particularly if we were going up to the north or northwest. I know you needed those antennas, but boy, we'd love to have gotten rid of them. And you have to put stakes out so when they traverse the tube, hit something and be a reminder, don't pull the trigger here, because the infantry likes their homes.
We could hear those rounds going over too, just
Oh, sure.
in case you're.
Well, we didn't mind. We didn't hear anything. Yeah, we were all deaf. We didn't hear anything.
Don't have an aerial burst either on that.
Yeah, that'd be, you're right. PT rounds would have been disastrous. In fact, when I went in for my hearing, I think Ray was mentioning it, or somebody mentioned about, they asked, well, didn't you have hearing protection? I said, well, I'm on the line with the battery. The Fire Direction Center is giving me their commands on what the elevation should be, the charge is figured out, the deflection on it, and I've got this in my ear. Now, the other one, I'm hollering out at the people. I've got to make sure that they understand very clearly and exactly what I'm saying. There's no room for hearing protection. The only hearing protection is just try and holler louder than everything else that's going on, which we did pretty effectively, really. But we should have been up on top of the LZ. One of the other problems that we had during the night and all day, somebody asked me last night, didn't I have an inkling that we were going to get attacked when the ammo dump went up? Well, actually, no. That might date back to missing 4 days
I
at
agree
Cameron.
completely with you.
But there was just no communication between us. Normally, we supported the 2nd of the 5th. So part of it may be that we didn't have familiar personalities to rely on. The rest of us, it was busy. I mean, when you fire 1,500 rounds a day times, 6.2s, and actually we were down to 5 for the most part, you don't have time to establish friendships and chains of communication. I think that maybe if we could have done that, maybe it'd help, but on the other hand, the circumstance was such that we had a round come in, I guess it's late afternoon. Maybe I should start off a little bit earlier. Late morning, we had some incoming, and 2 people were killed from our battery. I had the FDC report that in to battalion because the battery commander, Captain Weiss, was over there for a battalion meeting. He immediately flew back, and when he got back, he says, go up and do a crater analysis, which is you look in which way the hole points, where the shrapnel is gone, and you know, not necessarily what distance, but you know what direction it came from. Nobody wanted to do that, because when you get out there, you know one round is landed right here. Now, if they do everything right, maybe they can land another there while I'm sitting here doing a crater analysis. So we sped through that as quick as we could. The top came over to me and he says, I got a boot here. I said, well, let me see it. Top, there's a foot in the boot. I said, we don't have anybody missing a foot. Take it up to the infantry and see what they can, what kind of light they can shed on it. I took it up, and sure enough, it belonged to the guy that I think was the day before that got a direct hit from an artillery round. Mortar, yeah. And that was all that was left of it. It was a grisly thing, along with seeing my first 2 men of my battery killed. You know, I may have been first in line for 2 meals today, but I sure wasn't that day, I assure you.
Would that have been Singleton on May 3rd?
I
think so.
believe so.
It was a day or two before the attack.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody here was one of the guys that
Who knew Singleton?
responded.
It was single.
Oh.
Okay.
He had just come out of a bunker, and the round landed right on top of the bunker, and he was pulverized.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Were you
kind
I
of
was
a
down there.
piece together. But weren't you right there?
I was. We found so little of this soldier that,
Four people carried him off in a poncho.
and that he had to have an escort back to the, I'm sorry,
Graves registration.
Graves registration to identify who he was, because there was nothing else to identify.
Where would his bunker, would it be in that bottom half there?
Would have been, might have been this one of these right here,
Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Maybe not a little farther
to the
Yeah,
left.
I think probably
Okay.
down.
All right, it was one of these, because I was on the top of the hill and I saw it happen too.
Yeah, when you see a line of hooches on the southeastern side of the LZ, up top, that was the artillery hooches. And then you see another line of not as elaborate hooches, you know, the low rent district, so to speak. That's where all the infantry guys were. You know, 'cause we want them outside the line and to do the defense. When Weiss got back, I had not had a chief of smoke, which is kind of the XO of NCOs for a battery. He's right behind the first sergeant and actually takes care of XO jobs when I would be in the FDC or whatever. I hadn't had one in forever, so I was really excited to see this guy. And he landed out there where I was pointing out to you, that little pad up there we normally took in ammo. And I went out there to meet him and bring him back up and introduced him to each of the section chiefs. And we got about maybe less than halfway up towards the FDC. Incoming came in. I mean, I'm talking to him. He's walking right here. He took wounds in the hand and the legs, just immediately collapsed. I wasn't touched. So as you hear some of the rest of my war stories, you realize why I feel like I was so lucky there that night. But we medevaced him, and here I am without Chief of Smoke again. Which didn't matter because later on we were without a battery. But Weiss came in, and shortly after that, a round hit in our ammo. Now, we had so much ammo out there because at that time, the Cav was going over to Ashau, and the Marines were going to be responsible for our supply. That was less than dependable, folks. And so what we did, we had the Cav just bring in a potload of ammo. And we had 2,000 to 3,000 rounds sitting up there just a little bit south of the FDC. And in fact, a lot of it tumbled down the hill. And we had to form, somebody's got a picture. John, you had a picture of the Congo line where they're passing the ammo boxes up?
Yes.
I knew I'd seen it. And we just put a line all the way down there and pass it up box by box by box. And when you got, we probably had half of it, 1,000 rounds or more maybe, passed up there hand by hand.
Is this it?
That's not common.
No.
I don't have it on this slide, but I do have a picture of the element.
Do you see the top left-hand corner of that? That's where all the ammo was. And it was rolled down this hill that way. Not a pleasant task in that heat and everything.
You mean when the incoming hit it?
Yeah.
It,
No. This tumbled down there as it was delivered to
Okay.
us. And then they had to hand carry it back up there. And when they did, they just stacked it all together, you know, in hopes of shooting it in the next 4 or 5 hours, perhaps. But, excuse me. When the round hit the ammo, of course, there's a lot of powder. There's powder bags. The 105 round is made up of 7 charges, and they're bags ranging from this big for a charge 7 down to like that for a charge 1. And blew that up and it created a fire. Well, when the fire started going, it raised very quickly, and people on Snapper said they sat there and watched it because it just lit the sky up. The flames were like 100 feet in the air. Those of us, of course, there were a lot of us in the FDC because we had the communication means in there, the radios, informing battalion, you know, they want to know who's smoking on your hill, you know. We just had a terrible conflagration going there. And as it got worse and worse and rounds started cooking off, we couldn't get out of the thing because the door led right out straight to it. And we're sitting here and Captain Weiss, who was just a very sensitive individual, he always wanted to take care of what he called his kids, all the troops in there. He was just devastated by the death of 2 of our guys. And then he sees this happen, and he grabbed an entrenching tool and started out the door. So we got to get that fire out. Well, we'd have bulldozers, they weren't going to put that fire out. So I grabbed him, pulled back, and said, "Kevin, I don't think that's a good idea." And he sat down, and just a look of devastation and being distraught came over his eyes. And he got so worked up on it that shortly after that, he was medevaced for heat stroke. And that's what led to my first promotion as a commander. Not the circumstances I would have chosen. But as we got up there, the next thing I had to do, because fire's going, small rounds were kicking off, I went up, begged, borrowed anything I could from the infantry for places for my men to sack in, to be, you know, out from under the stars, so to speak, and try and get some food. And they were all very accommodating. Never a problem other than this Woodruff. During the fight, he went down to one bunker and started to go in. He says, "Let me come in." He says, "No room in here, bud." So that's how he wound up on top of the bunker. We had another one. Worst circumstances I think maybe I've ever heard of. We had a cook that was hitching a ride. Lost his Barry DeMaria. He hitched a ride on a helicopter supposed to go over to Snapper to battalion, and they diverted to Peanuts and let him off there. So he was stuck on Peanuts for the night. He tried to tell one of the infantry, he says, "I'm not supposed to be here, I'm just a cook." Very terse reply. "Not tonight, you're not."
yeah.
And he wasn't.
I've got some pictures I can do there.
Is it that in, that's kind of the spot where the crater was?
Yeah, that's the fire.
Yeah.
That's where our ammo dump was that went
So
up.
is it possible that the crater was,
Oh, that could be,
Caused
because
by
it's
the
on that
explosion.
side.
Quite possible, sure.
because that would make sense.
Because actually, if I remember correctly, and you know, this is a take it for what it's worth moment. I already told you, I can't remember squat. I want to think that we started that as a burn pit. When you fire, and most of our missions were close, so we were only firing charge 2, charge 3. So the majority of the powder had to be burned off. You can't just leave that sitting out, or you'll have
Yeah,
circumstances
you
like
get
this.
you get a charge 7 with every round.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, in our cases, we were also getting 4, 5, and 6. So a lot of powder there. And I remember we used that as a burn pit because the XO is responsible for doing that. We throw it down in there and you put it in a line because you put it all at once, whoosh. So that may have started as a burn pit too. And then it may be fortunate, you know, because then when the ammo went up, we at least had something constricting the explosive part of it. But we're sitting in the FDC, to finish that part, hearing rounds whiz over us and thunk into the boxes and the small arms ammo cooked off. So we were trying to figure out what in the world we're going to do, and some of the infantry guys came back and we started knocking out the back wall. Not an easy thing to do because they're all interlaced ammo boxes. They're like you do bricks, you know, here. But they're all filled with dirt. So it's not an easy task, but we managed to pull out enough back there that we could all get out of the FDC there and get up and start, as I said, you know, look for accommodations and so forth. When the firing started, they were talking about Lieutenant Catrone. I was up top in a fairly large bunker. I don't know what it was for. We had about most of my FDC folks in there and a couple infantry guys. And I heard, you know, 2 explosions. And I just told my guys, I says, you know, hunker down, guys. We're getting hit again. And I thought we were getting more incoming. All of a sudden, I heard all this small arms fire going off. And even me figured out that's more than just incoming artillery. So we went on out there, and I grabbed my radio that I had. I had a Prick 25 out of the FDC, and just slung it over my shoulder and started checking on everybody. I went down, and as I was doing that, a wounded 1st of the 5th guy came up, because that bunker was in, I'd established as a command post with me and Top. And the 1st and 5th guy crawled up there, and he was wounded right in here. And he said, "Don't let me bleed to death. Don't let me bleed to death." And calling for his mother. And took a bandage and put it around his leg. And I went over to find our medic, Doc Talaferro, to go over and take care of him. As I was looking for him, I just got an impact on my back that threw me forward like this to my knees. And I thought, some fool ran into me. And I got up, no radio. I had 2 rounds that had gone through the back of that Prick 25. So it was useless. And I was devastated because I had to have that to get some illumination rounds up there. So as I was going around checking people, and I saw Eddie Schiavone, and he was slightly wounded at that time, but still firing a machine gun like crazy. I just advised him, make sure you go in short bursts because we don't have unlimited ammo. Of course, when I lost that radio, I was so devastated. I didn't think about the fact that it had probably saved my life, or at least from a bad wound. And all I wanted was a radio. So I was asking about it. Somebody told me, said, "Well, I think the Black Cat has one." And I said, "Well, or it has 2." I said, "Well, I need one of them bad." So I went back down the hill to try and find him. When I got down there, my first sergeant says, "Yeah, he's down there." I said, "Well, I got to go get the radio." He says, "Tim, there's NVA all over the place down there. You can't go there." I said, "I can't go without a radio either." So I went down there, and as I got near him, I hollered, "Friendly, friendly, don't fire." Well, I was charging. He didn't even have time to fire, and I hit the thing down there, and said, "I need one of your radios." He said, "There it is, but we need to get rid of these guys first." And he had a couple cases of grenades down there. He says, "Help me get these guys." He says, "Throw them out as far as you can." Well, I pitched in college, so I have a pretty good arm. And I cut loose one with about 40 yards down range. He says, "Let's let the artillery take care of them." True story. This was true. Write it down. He said, "Help me roll these down." I'm scared of grenades. Always have been. When I was a basic combat training officer at Fort Lewis, we had these concrete walls that you throw over on testing range. I saw somebody make a really bad throw and hit it and dive out, and that forcing went right into the sump that they had there. But I've been scared to death of those things ever since. So I want to get that down range. And he said, no, we got to get rid of these. They were closing in on us. It's people that Charlie was talking about. It looked like, you know, when you're a kid, you go and you kick an anthill and just whoo, everywhere. That's what it reminded me of. I hadn't seen that many NVA in one spot in my entire time over there. So we're pulling pins and rolling.
I have this picture up so they can see it, and I'm pointing out things you're referring to.
Yeah, okay, good. And Ted, down there, I said, well, I gotta have one of your radios. And we ran out of grenades, and I carried, another one of my brilliant moves, I carried an old World War II tanker submachine gun, a 45 caliber.
Yeah,
We call it
grease
grease
gun.
gun. Yeah, because I figured if we ever got overrun, that's a great weapon to have because it's got such hard power if you hit somebody. Keyword, if you hit somebody. You had a barrel about that long on them. They had a tendency to want to ride. Great anti-aircraft gun. If you pull it, they want to go up. But I've traded that actually. I didn't trade it so much as I gave it to somebody because I figured everything was going on. I could pick up somebody's M16 pretty quickly. So I went back up the hill at that time. And before we got up to where I established a CP, we heard cries from a collapsed bunker. And satchel charge had evidently gone off there, in it, or near. And there was a first and fifth guy in there crying out for help. And Ted Catrone started throwing ammo boxes and sandbags off of it as I grabbed his legs and pulled him out. And I left Ted with him as I went to get our medic again and direct him on down there to take care of him. Don't know who it was, I don't know what happened. He didn't seem to be, in as much danger from a wound as he was from being crushed by the weight of the sandbags or anything that fell on him. On the way back too, I felt another impact back here on my hip. All the liquid down my leg. I thought, oh my God, I've been hit. I'm going to die. Can't imagine how excited I was to find out that he just shot my canteen off my hip. All the water was leaking out down my leg. And I don't tell that story to many folks. Let me tell you.
Second luckiest day of your life.
Oh, absolutely. You know, my mother always said I could fall in the sewer and come up smelling like a rose, and it sure worked out that day.
I really do.
And you know, while I was running around up there, the thing that kept going through my mind was when I was out with the infantry as an FO. My first night out there, I came out and I took my shelter half and fashioned a hammock out of it. Got in that thing, threw a mosquito net over me, and I had just gotten comfortable. And the company commander says, I need you over here by me all the time. I said, well, I'm only like 15 yards away from you. He says, yeah, but if we get hit, the SOP is to hit and shoot anything that moves. Everybody else stays in their bunker. If something's up and moving, it's the bad guys. And that's all I did all night. I was running around in the open. I'm thinking, boy, I am pushing the envelope on this. Just awfully stupid. But anyway, I got hold of 1st and 50th and got illumination rounds on the way. And we found those. Everybody was down on ammo. And I ran into Schiavone again. And he was about the same, but running low on ammo. I said, okay, I'll try to get something. About that time, and I don't know who called it in, but God bless him, a Huey came in with an ammo dump, small arms, M16, M60, and grenades. I ran up there and grabbed a metal box of M60 rounds to take down to him. Ran into Lukey on the way, gave it to him, and said, take these to Schiavone. And I think that he was one of them that discovered Eddie initially. But then I got a call from First of 50. We had constant aluminum, and a lot of the rounds were old, so they were firing two at once sometimes because one of them wouldn't go off. So they fired a second one where we'd have constant illumination. And then I got a call from them saying, last round on the way. Well, hell, it's still dark out there. You tell me last round. Somebody had coordinated or called and gotten spooky online. I wasn't the one that called, but I adjusted it throughout the night. Thank you. First Coors Light is on me. But they came in and were dropping, and I had one communication with them. They thought too I was the dumbest lieutenant in the world. Because I asked them, you know, I don't know, was it 500 meters, what they go off, anyway, whatever it was, I asked for one not to go off until they were like, you know, ground level almost. Thought was there's a lot of grass out there, dry grass. I said, well, if I can get that down and burn, I'll get a fire going there and it'll backlight all the NVA that are coming there. Well, it didn't start a fire, but I did have the backlight thing, and boy, you talk about them scattering when they got backlit down there. They were just going. You could see them. It looked like they had taken almost a hook and grabbed their compatriots and were pulling them, just dragging them, because there was.
Yeah.
Is that what?
That's a technical, because they would police the battlefield, and often they would bring these hooks and lines, so they would take their dead and wounded and get them off the battlefield.
Yeah, because I could see. I thought it was like a stick they attached or something, you know, because there was a room between the guy's arm and the body that he was carrying. I'm glad to finally get that cleared up.
That was news for me too.
Yeah.
But they were pulling back, and Spooky started firing the minigun down there. God, was that a beautiful sound! I mean, it sounds like somebody passing beer gas, you know. But it's just this long string of red down there, and you know there's rounds in between each one.
What did that sound like?
You do that again.
Like you at lunch. But that was good. That helped clear things off as well. The prettiest thing I saw beyond the miniguns firing was when BMT found the NVA breaking contact. That's beginning of morning nautical BMNT, I guess it is. Anyway, when the sun started coming up. So they started breaking contact at that point. And we went down, and the worst part of this and my memories is seeing the body bags stacked up. To this day, when I see body bags, it disturbs me, because it's the only flashback I really have, but it's a strong one. And then, of course, battalions started calling me, wanting to sit reps, and can you take a mission? I said, no. Can you see the LZ from there? Well, yeah. I mean, of course, I overstepped my bounds talking to him, as was my custom. He says, well, we'll evacuate you then. I said, okay, well, good. Sooner the better. He said, well, you got 30 minutes. I said, 30 minutes? And normally, when you hook them up, you got to put the howitzers on ring, you hook that up to the chopper. You got what we call an A22 bag, which you put all your basic load of ammo. All we put in there was the Beehive and the co-frame rounds that we could find, because everything had gotten scattered and went up. And I told him, I says, 3, we can't get ready that time. I mean, that's like a quarter of what it normally takes. I mean, you can take half a day to get that stuff.
Mike, can I ask,
Yeah.
how much of that was from the ammo dump going up, and how much of that was from sapper charges?
It's mixed, and you'll see the 2 Jeeps here. That's from our friend sitting here, firing ARA into them. I mean, that was my Jeep.
But you gotta understand, the bad guys were on the other side of the Jeeps. And at that time, Ted and I were on this side of the Jeeps. Ted is the guy you see with the orange
Shoot high angle.
right there. Yeah.
Lob a grenade.
Well, all the grenades have been thrown downrange.
Way
By
down
the
there.
ex-baseball.
This will give you an idea of a bunker that was hit from the inside Satchel Church, because all of the sandbags are out on the
Well,
side.
We could shoot indirect fire, why couldn't we shoot?
Well, you know,
Because,
Joe, I have a picture I'll show you. Well, first thing, we were about here, and we had ARA rounds landing right here. I'll find another picture. But for those that haven't seen these pictures before, this was May 4th, before the fire and before the incoming round. And this was the morning of May 5th, after the battle.
I don't know this for a fact, but I heard it. That at one point during the fight, Charlie was traversing one of the howitzers back up to the top of the hill to fire direct on the battalion TOC. And our weapons platoon took it out with a 106 recoilless rifle.
there were actually a couple of them we suspected that was the case, because our last mission was set up firing almost directly west. And to have the two of them going back uphill, that were still attached to the ground, makes us suspect that. I question how successful that'd be. There's a lot to be done to do that. I mean, they got to find a round that hadn't been blown up. They've got to know how to open the breech, close it, pull the lanyard. I don't know how successful, because you got to remember, they were withering and getting a hailstorm of fire put on them. If it were me, I wouldn't be back behind that thing trying to do it, because they were pretty successful with their satchel charges, which were carrying as much. Besides that, when a round goes out, it, as you well know, it takes a certain time to arm itself.
Well,
Yeah,
there's
you got to have
kinetic-
so many rotations.
There's kinetic energy too.
Well, yeah, but we couldn't hit anybody from here to there with 16.
And the TOC, you can't see the antenna in this photo right here from this gun. So the TOC was actually over the hill. I think it's a urban myth war story.
For what it's worth, I highly doubt that they had any serious intention of using
I
that
agree.
way. I mean, not to say that, one or two intrepid individuals got the bright idea, but as you said,
Probably second lieutenant.
yeah, I mean, it's, they had, plenty of satchel charges, and quite frankly, that's gonna be more effective.
Time is a big thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Ask one question.
Sure.
Did y'all have flash hits?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's what the Beehive was.
Yeah, behind
But you
them.
can't shoot them when they're blown up and scattered all over the hillside and two of your tubes are laying on the ground.
The guns that night were out of commission.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, even if we'd have had them and the guns were in commission, not a good place to use it because the LZ wasn't so big. The only thing we could aim at was the TOC.
And you couldn't point that gun down.
No.
Any possibility that concussion waves of explosions could have altered the,
Yes, I'll tell you why. The M102, 105 has a ring on the bottom of it, about yay big, and you can put up to 6 stakes. And I'm not talking stakes, I'm talking this big. And you can put up to 6 of them down there if you're in sandy soil. Well, that soil up there was clay, just hard as concrete. By the time they got 2 of the stakes down there, they were exhausted, figured that would be it. But displacement from the firing could have loosened those things up too. And we wouldn't be checking that because we had, it used to be aiming sticks. You remember all the red and white stakes that stuck up? Well, we got high tech and gave us what they called collimeters. Anyway, it's a little telescope-looking thing about that big, and it's got numbers in it. And you take your deflection aiming sight and go in there with the numbers, and that's how you make the corrections. So I don't know if that happened. We had a couple of our guys say they went down and disabled them too. I don't know how they would do that. It takes takes a lot of knowledge, time, and strength to take a breech block out of the thing. So that may be one of those stories that, like mine, that you might be true.
I was just looking at this picture, and I was wondering if this is the crater that Jeanette walked by, up to this end.
Yeah, that was a 152 from Laos. That's the same type of weapon they were firing into Quezon. And of course, when the Marines left there, we were the biggest game in town. Now, we were, as you mentioned, we were their biggest pain in the kazoo.
We were right in the gun line,
We
right?
used to sit here and here and go right over.
Yeah.
When they're hitting Quezon. So yeah, that came from Russia.
Could have been it.
See, I've never known what direction I'm facing, looking at that
We
photo.
were looking just about south, right there, south, slightly southeast. You're looking
Okay.
along the line of guns
Right. Well,
in this picture.
the crater that I was on the west side.
Well,
That's a gun.
you could have, the trail you were on could have been right beside it there as
Yeah.
it worked its way up there too.
See,
That's a big
if
hole.
it were the opposite direction where I'm looking north, like here, like where that howitzer is, the hole is to the right,
Yeah.
all the way to the right. It's out of that picture frame, so.
Okay.
To continue my conversation with the S3, when he told me we had 30 minutes, and I said, there's no way. He says, well, if you don't get it done in 30 minutes, you're going to have to stay there tonight. We'll be ready, sir. Yeah, and we were. I have no idea what was in those 822 bags. They weren't what was supposed to be, but it wasn't personal items either. Troops lost just about all their personal items. All I got off of there with was a picture of my wife I had that had just a little BB-sized shrapnel hole right by her head in the photo. And I keep telling her, I says, never was a very good shot.
The other thing, talking about beehive rounds, there were beehive rounds that were laying on the tube, ready to be used. But when you depress that tube, you can't go negative, it goes level. And if you looked at those pictures, if you fired it out, it was gonna go straight on out and not really do very much for you,
Yeah.
except when you're shooting at the other guns.
Hey Charlie, how close did the NVA get to the top wire?
There were a couple of dead sappers, probably within 50 meters.
You got, are those yours, those pictures?
Well, it's a collection of all of ours, yeah. So they probably got within 50 meters of the talk.
Band off the two of those.
If I might interject, the three sappers who got me, I got two of the sappers, but the one that I missed, I couldn't shoot him because he went up the hill toward the top and turned behind a bunker. So I had no shot on him, and that's when I ran back to my sergeant and said, tell HQ, you know, you got a sapper in the wire. And at that point, they said, well, you know, they know. And we were on the north side, and we didn't, our position didn't take a round all night. Not one round.
And you never asked me to come there.
Hey, you were invited.
He was a round magnet.
You were bad luck.
Where
They
the
used to call
cursor
me
is, would have been the north end.
Yeah, I was on the north end.
There's your mortar, there's your talk, and there are the guns down the
Yeah.
hill a little bit. And this is where the vast majority of the NBA were coming up the hill at us.
On the north end, it was extremely steep, so it was
Here, to
difficult.
follow up what you said there, when I was out with the infantry, as an FO in, like John, pardon me, they used to call me Lieutenant Magnet Ass. It seemed like every time I showed up there, we got hit. We'd get incoming.
What is the CB-47?
In the very early days of developing LZ peanuts, I think they planned on bringing a 155 battery out, and they were going to put it on this area, patch of land that they had actually partially cleared, but they never developed it. So in one of the photos, you see a C-47, pardon me, CH-47 sitting out there.
I believe we had an LP out there. And I don't know if
Okay.
anybody was on it, but
It probably would have been right in that point right there.
That,
Yep.
that area was where they medevaced your captain from. I was on the detail
Right.
that went out and formed perimeter security for that medevac. And it was there, and it was a very easy access, and that's where they came at us from the west.
Yeah, he didn't ask me to go with him either.
Yeah.
You guys just weren't very good hosts. But anyway, kudos to the Army. When we got over to LZ Jane, which is where they took us from Peanuts, we had 6 tubes sitting there ready for us. We didn't have our basic load of ammo, but we had 6 tubes there. And we were kind of like out of the frying pan into the fire, because the next day when we got that ammo got set up, we got mortared again. We had 2 guys that night lose their eyes to incoming mortar. So we were out of the frying pan in, or out of,
when you say 6 tubes, 100% TOE?
yeah. Yeah. Which we didn't have on Peanut. We only had 5 there. That also, one follow-up there. It came down to me with this report of survey, which for those who don't know, that's kind of like an inventory of what you owe. And they had the entire battery on there because we lost 100% of it. I'm sitting here looking at that thing and it's like 7 figures. And I'm thinking, okay, first lieutenant makes about 300 something, but who's going to pay for this? And they said, oh, well, the Army will. So,
Build
Gone.
Vietnam.
yeah,
I was going to ask you, you went back to Jane, did you ever end up on Barbara?
yeah.
I swear I got a picture of a tube with birth control on the barrel.
Well, that's probably us. I don't know of any other birth control.
Yeah, no, the only other birth control I saw was on a quad 50 on a deuce and a half.
Yeah.
With
yeah,
cowl,
seen
the
that.
front
I've
of the
seen that
cowl and the
picture,
birth
yeah.
control on it.
Yeah.
Mike, here's your prick 25 right here.
Yeah.
Okay. Benny
I
pulled all
wasn't
the
his,
stuff off the hill.
obviously.
Yeah.
A couple of rounds in that.
Now, there's one that's around in a module, it could have been yours, I don't know, but it's no, it's beyond, I think it's,
I
I
don't
don't know if
have all
you got, yeah, up there, you see that right by the plug? That's an AK-47 round.
Well, I feel fairly sure that's what got my
And
radio.
the other shot could have been in the battery.
The canteen probably came from an M60 because I saw the red tracer from it.
Yeah, you talk about fog of war. I was on the north side also, and we didn't get the contact. We didn't know what was going on in the battery or on the other side of the hill, other than there was a lot of shooting going on, and we needed to call Snoopy because the artillery had run out of illumination.
Well, you know, you guys, the north side was steeper.
Yeah.
So they came up that draw over there on the northwest side, I guess you can call it mostly the western side, on the northern end of it. Came up there because they had, you know, and you can look at the map and see the lines there are farther apart. So they had flatter ground to cover, easier to come up.
But you see, I'm thinking out loud. I don't believe the fire on the 4th, I mean, the effective rounds and the attack that night were connected, except that they had been firing at us every day, and this day they actually were quite effective. That was sort of a bonus for them. And they planned on attacking the artillery battery all from the very beginning. So this wasn't planned during that afternoon.
I
Oh,
agree.
no.
They took advantage of the situation.
They took advantage of the situation, but they attacked the battery not knowing how much damage had been done during the afternoon and not knowing that we had pulled all of our people out of the actual battery, which was damn fortunate, okay? So, although they occurred simultaneously, I don't think they were connected except for darn luck on the 4th, hitting the ammo.
Yeah.
In my opinion, we did not give them near enough credit. I did not know half of the capability that they had as far as tapping into our radios and simulating our calls and popping our color of smoke, and the artillery and rockets and mortars that they had, and the way they had our positions registered. We just took a lot of stuff for granted.
How about the tanks at the old French Fort? They brought in the PT
T-76s.
76, yeah, which is an amphibious
We
tank
didn't know, yeah, I'm sorry.
to a certain extent. Oh, yeah.
No, no, go ahead, finish.
I think I did, I don't remember
Oh,
what I said anyway. I finished a lot of my sentences
We
that
did,
way.
we did not know it at the time, but this was the NBA 66th Regiment that we were fighting. And Eric could tell you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, well, the enemy unit system is curious. It's different than ours, because not to go into great detail, but during the French Indochina War, the Viet Minh, created a set of divisions that they ended up using, in the final phase against the French. And in the Vietnam War, our Vietnam War, those divisions provided the cadre training nucleus for most of the NVA units that fought in the South. But the way they did was like 325th, had 3 regiments, right? So it would send us, it would send the 66 down to join the war, but it would send, 70% and hold 30% behind as a training reserve. And then that 30% would clone a new 66. So there were 3 66 regiments running around South Vietnam at your time.
I thought this was a 304 division.
It is a 304, part of the 304. The 325 and the 304 were the 2 NBA divisions investing based on the 325, actually the 325C, right, because there was already A and a B. 325C goes down to Central Highlands, which leaves the 304th behind, which was essentially composed of the 9th Regiment and the 66th. But yes, bottom line is it was considered one of their really good units. And yeah, and they'd been in an AO for 6 months.
During the attack, did you hear any bugles?
I have people that said they did. I heard whistles. I didn't hear any bugles, but, I was on the way to being stone deaf anyway. But my first sergeant and one of my FDC people said that they heard bugles towards the end, just before BMNT. What, did you, is that why you're asking the question, or you just heard the story?
I had never heard that they were using them at LZ Peanuts, but I have heard that they used them to communicate with their forces before in a combat situation, so I was just trying to reinforce that.
Yeah, I mean, it was they adopted that from their Chinese advisors in the first Indochina War.
Okay.
And in the early days of Vietnam, there were times where they would use bugles. That tended to become less and less often, and by even 68, pretty uncommon. Partly because they were actually starting to get a decent number of radios. I mean, that's why you use bugles,
Right.
because you don't have radios, and they were actually starting to get enough so that they could.
That was one of the things that surprised me in following what you said, was how sophisticated they were, not necessarily compared to us, but compared to what I thought they were.
Right.
When we got up north with the NBA, the old days of having a rusty shotgun and digging punji pits for their entire weaponry was over.
Well, how stupid is it to have the same call sign for an entire year? They knew perfectly well who was calling in artillery and who was communicating and where we were, and they knew more about us than we would like to believe.
As far as I remember, we kept birth control call sign for the entire time I was with the 77. And that was a period that ranged from January to September.
And you can't tell me they didn't know who the 6 was.
Oh yeah, undoubtedly.
He was talking about LZ Jane when I was at Jane, somewhere out beyond Barbara. You know where Barbara was? We had excuse my language, but I still call them Dukes. We had one out there jamming. The frequency was he probably had a 225 he stole from somebody. But he was jamming one of the frequencies we were trying to communicate with. Well, we set up a triangulation And I was on one end of it with my directional antenna with a signal meter. We triangulated a point on the map. And I think, did you have a half battery on Barbara or a full battery?
We had a half battery on a number of instances.
I think you
but I don't
had 3 guns up
remember
there.
which place.
Anyway, we called in coordinates. They put 12 volleys in on that coordinates. We jammed and stopped.
This was the NBA after-action report. This is part of the documents that were translated and supplied by Eric probably 4 or 5 years ago, and after digging through it and rereading it, I found a sentence that said on Form A, our forces attacked enemy troops on Hill 552, annihilating 3 U.S. companies, paren, 2 air cavalry companies, and 1 Marine company, and paren, and destroying 4 105 millimeter howitzers and 9 106.7 millimeter mortars, north and northwest of Tacon. Okay, so it should have been a period after that, mortars, period. So that's the extent of their internal statement at probably the regimental level. I can't remember what document this
Well,
was.
they were as bad at body
That
count as
was,
we were.
yeah, that was part of,
They were worse.
yeah, that was, I think that was part of the 3rd or 4th Division history. And like I said, I'm still looking to see if there's, more than that, but that's the one, that's the one specific reference. And I think too, I mean, the thing about these communist documents is there's really a lot of good information, but you have to understand how to read them. And there's certain things that cannot be relied on, usually results. Like they'll say we wiped out 500 American soldiers, right? And there were only like 40 on the hill in the first place, and they're infuriatingly sloppy about dates sometimes, and sometimes they don't get the unit identifications right. But this is one of those cases where I'm almost wondering if they're conflating 2 battles, like the Marine company that was attacking up the hill, right? Because their perception of a battle is not always the same perception of what a battle is, when it starts and when it ends. So,
The interpretations are awkward. You can get the gist of what they're trying to say. They do acknowledge that their troops' strength was low and the health of the soldiers had deteriorated. So, but they slightly exaggerated. We had one very depleted infantry company who'd been out in the field fighting Alpha Company. It was probably sitting around 100 soldiers at the time on the perimeter. And
We had less than 50,
you had 50.
less than 50.
Okay, wow. You had 50 that night. I didn't know. I thought it was less than that.
No, that was, 50 was the morning report strength several days before that. But when you count down, you can count the number of people it takes on a crew, how many in the FDC, and we probably had about 35 on the morning report, 44, 45.
Charlie, how many NVA did we estimate that we had killed that night?
I don't think we estimated it. We recorded 29 bodies, but I don't think we went beyond that. Not many, you guys in the 77 may not know, but that next morning, the battalion was flown out to Dong Ha, and the next morning it was flown up about 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers south of the DMZ, where the next morning they were attacked by an estimated NVA regiment. Charlie Company alone had, I think, 14 to 17 KIA and 44 wounded in action. They were fighting using flamethrowers. The NVA were against us. It was a fixed daylight battle. The entire battalion was surrounded by and taking fire from all sides. Effective mortar rounds dropped in on us. And I think the NVA in this one were fresh across the border because they were not afraid of anything. They'd come through the DMZ, in the last week or 2. And this was their first fight. So us and the 2-5 that were a couple of kilometers north of us had quite a difficult time for about 2 weeks because the 2-5 had a couple of tough days too. I think we probably lost 60, 70 KIA in our 2 battalions during that period. So, you know, as tough as Peanuts was for all of us, it didn't get easier when we left.
I asked our S3 that question about a body count outside the perimeter. And he said as far as he knew, there was never a sweep made outside the perimeter.
And as I said, the NV and VC, at least the main force units, were typically very disciplined about policing up the battlefield. So like I said, they would come with hooks and drag their dead and wounded, you know, pick up weapons, and then you usually, you know, bury them at some location as soon as they could. But part of it was to make it hard for you to know what their losses have been, to also deny potential intelligence, you know, unit identification, things like that.
We find a lot of hastily dug shallow graves
Yeah,
was
yeah.
that with the infantry.
Yeah.
You know, when I saw that deal, I didn't know anything about hooks, I just read it. I thought he just tied a rope around a guy's neck was cool, you know?
Yeah, it was like, because sometimes too, you know, they would throw the hook out. If someone was like on the wire, they'd throw the hook out and fish them back, right? So they wouldn't have to go and
Expose
pick them
themselves.
up. Yeah, so.
Mike, you might be, you were on board, I took a ride that morning, but you might be able to explain this photo.
That's Barry Lukey's picture.
Yeah, but it
Yeah.
occurred, Mike was there because the guns are still on the hill.
I believe that head you see there is me coming out of the FDC, and that's an incoming round.
It's a very accurate round.
That was the day after.
They shot a lot of them.
round.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were still taking a lot of incoming as we left.
That morning I went over there, they were still getting mortars, because
That's a big gun, too.
their mortars were following the chopper I was in.
Mike, did you call battalion and said, I know you said 30 minutes, but can't you get here in 20?
Yes, we're ready.
This was probably in minute 15 right here, so, no. The guns are still there, you can see them in the picture, at least 3 of them. But, wow.
Mark,
Whoops.
I think I remember you saying that you had about 3,000 rounds on site.
Yeah, between 2,500 and 3,000 when it went up, yeah.
Did you
Because
all do an inventory afterwards, or what did you do?
An inventory after it exploded?
Quite a bit of information
Hard to do.
on
no,
the site.
I just said there's a bunch of rounds that got blown up. That was my inventory. I mean,
So nobody did an inventory and just blew them in place?
I have no idea what did to them. You know, I got out the Cofran and the Beehive because, you know, they had a security attachment to them. And we put those in, and you got, everything was just scattered, blown up. I don't care where you were, everything was disheveled. When they re-equipped us, I mean, everybody got new rubber mattresses, new mosquito nets, everything. We didn't really care, to be honest with you. You know, I wrote a check for them, that's all I cared about. And I guess the reason, I may have mentioned this earlier, the reason that we had so much was because of the Marines or the CAV was moving over to the ASHAL, and we were going to have to be dependent upon the Marines for resupply on everything. And that wasn't a desirable situation, and it wasn't my decision for a change. Somebody else made a bad one, and they just brought all those in, which had they not had that lucky round, it had been a great decision, because we weren't going to get resupplied. You know, we were going to have to fire those. And when you, I think, you know, between 15 and 1,600 rounds was a high for a single day, but I would say the norm was, you know, 600 to 800. So you weren't talking but several days out of that, 3,000 rounds or whatever it was, 2,800, 3,000.
Do you know what the overall plan was, how long we were going to be on Peanuts before the attack?
No, I don't. In all honesty, we very seldom, if ever, had an idea how long we were going to be anywhere. I mean, it wasn't always 30 minutes, but most of the time it would be, you're moving tomorrow for such and such, or early in the morning say, you know, be prepared to move out this afternoon.
Close station, march order.
Yeah,
They, you know, they were gonna pull us out pretty quickly because, in parallel with what we were going through, the Marines were in a battle, just east of Dong Ha called the Battle of Dai Do, where they had lost, their casualties were well in excess of 100 to 150. It was right along the Dong Ha River. The area was a freeway of North Vietnamese coming across the DMZ, and down in there, the cooks in Dong Ha were telling us that they had their weapons out and they were on the perimeter at night, expecting to be attacked. So they planned on pulling our 2 battalions and another battalion of the Army, which they did, and putting us as a stopgap south of the DMZ, north of Dong Ha. I could get you that picture, but because things were really bad over there. The Marines were very, very depleted.
And it should be noted, the night of 4 to 5 May was the official start of the Second General Offensive, so the attack on Peanuts was a part of that. It was also designed, I believe, to potentially deny the Allies some important air mobile reserves, because the Battle of Dong Ha or Dai Do had been raging for the past 4 or 5 days, and it was clear that units like yours had a lot more mobility than the Marine units, so they were going to take a swipe at you all they could.
You know, we were beginning to feel a bit expendable when the Cav moved to the ASHAL.
Yeah.
We look at our map and say, all of a sudden we're not firing like we were. Where are all the peoples?
Yeah. No.
Well, you talk about going to Alshar and Dong Ha after stud. We convoyed up there. We packed up the provision support and convoyed. And on the way somewhere up near Rockpile, we ran into a Marine patrol on the side of the road. And we stopped and said, what's going on, guys? Can we give you any help? Well, we're waiting to get picked up. They didn't have a radio. The whole patrol didn't even have a radio. And I said, well, how do you know? We were asking, how do you know when to get picked up? Well, we kind of think they're going to come by and give us anything.
This being Dong Ha and Dai Do being right here, this is where
Yeah.
the Marines were really getting chewed. Go ahead.
Just like I said, the 320th NBA Division comes across the border, and elements of the 52nd and some other forces come all the way down and invest these hamlets. And the 64th Regiment is fighting over here on this side, and the 48th is waiting in reserve right around there. So after this battle, began, as the Marines counterattacked, started driving the NBA back, that's when they brought, 1-5, 2-5, dropped them behind the retreating 52nd Regiment to figure out how to cut them off. But again, with almost no intelligence, right? There was a South Vietnamese strong point, one of the C strong points here, but the South Vietnamese were kind of under siege. And so this is a howling wilderness of no intelligence and nothing. And I'm pretty sure, we can talk about this later at dinner, but it's that little draw right there as you're going into those big sand flats looking for the NVA, that's where the big part of the 48th Regiment was waiting.
Where's
as
the rock?
a backstop.
Where's the rock pile in relation to this?
Rock pile is over here. So this is like a Leatherneck Square. So you've got Jilin and Cantien, and then Dong Ha. But the sort of the strong point system of the McNamara Wall is along this area, and those forward strong points again were designed to monitor and help limit infiltration. But basically the 320th Division came through the sector along here between the two strong points in a sector that just there weren't a lot of foot patrol, so they just came marching down in the middle of the night and got all the way down there before anyone knew what was going on. But Yeah, you can see this is the Quad Viet, that river we were talking about, that's why they had that strong points. If you gave up the strong points, you retreated back to the Dong Ha River, well then that goes into artillery and mortar range. And those ships, those Navy LSTs and other things that are bringing supplies to Dong Ha, which is helping sustain the force up there, that gets shut down. So that's one important reason why you had to maintain those forward bases. And unfortunately, you know, those forward bases like Jilin and Kanchan were within striking distance of North Vietnam, so it wasn't a fun place to be.
Yeah, even down to Dong Ha, they could get,
Go there tonight, or we
I think we're losing
the
it.
Infantry Museum.
I think everybody's
You good for today?
battled out.